Okay, today we're going to finish off our work on percentages by just making some really clear links to decimals and fractions. We've already done quite a lot of work with fractions this week because we saw, for instance, with something like 10%, that percent, remember, means part out of 100, so I can write any percentage as a fraction with 100 as a denominator. So that was 10 parts out of 100, which we said we could simplify by dividing the top and bottom by 10 to 1/10. Now, as soon as I hear 1/10, I think to myself, oh, place value. So I can have my ones and my tenths column, 1 part out of 10, 1/10. So it's very easy to convert from percentages to fractions and to decimals. Now that follows us through. If you wanted something like 70%, well, we've got 70 parts out of 100, 70 hundredths, or 7 tenths, which again, 0.7, 7 tenths. Something like 63%, well, 63 parts out of 100, can't simplify this any further, but I can turn it into a decimal. I've got 63 hundredths, or 6 tenths, 3 hundredths. One of the ones just to watch is something like 4%. So I get 4 hundredths, which is going to be the same as 0. Now not 0.4, that would be 4 tenths. Hundredths, remember, is the second column after the decimal point. So I need this placeholder here to show that I've got no tenths and 4 hundredths. I could also simplify fractions further. So for instance, 4 hundredths, well, I can see they're both in the 2 times tables. So I could have divided top and bottom by 2, which gives me 2 fiftieths, still in the 2 times table, divide by 2 again, gives me 1 25th. Now all of these things here, they're written differently, but they all have the same value. And that's really important, again, in maths, just to remember that we can switch between these different forms. And we're going to see why that's useful in a moment. So just for now, I'd like you to write as fractions and percent and decimals these percentages. So you've got fractions first, and then do it as a decimal. Pause the video, unpause when you're done. Okay, so hopefully you've got 80 hundredths or 8 tenths, which gives me 0.8. 23 hundredths, can't simplify, is 0.23. And 5 hundredths gives me 0.05. Remember that placeholder there, 5 hundredths, not 5 tenths. Now, one of the things with fractions is it's really important that we just know some key fraction decimal percentage equivalents. So for instance, ones that are very useful to know, if we think about the fractional form first, it's useful to know half, quarter, a fifth, and from there you can also work out, for instance, 3/4. Now, a half, if we remember, what's really easy is to go from a fraction with the denominator of 100 to a percentage, because percentage means parts out of 100, denominator of 100 means parts out of 100. So if I can turn these fractions into fractions with a denominator of 100, it then becomes very easy to turn them into percentages. So again, knowing some key facts is very important. Well, 2 times 50 is 100, so do the same at the top, 50 hundredths. So half is the same as 50%. 50 is half of 100, so that makes sense. Well, 4 times 25 is 100. So do the same thing. So a quarter is the same as 25%. A quarter is half of a half. Half of 50 is 25. 1/5, well, is times now by 20. 20 hundredths, so 20%. A fifth is 20%. So 3/4 then was going to be 3 times 25, which is 75%. Again, we've times by 25, 3 times 25, 75 hundredths. And really just learning these facts is really important. So practice those, keep going over them. We'll go over them a lot more as well in year 6. Ordering and comparing. So for instance, I might want to say, can I put in ascending order, so from smallest to biggest, these numbers here. And let's also do So what's the order of these? Well, the trick first is to turn them all into the same type of number. So I'm going to turn them all into percentages. So this one is already 43%. This one we've just seen, half is the same as 50%. 0.4 is not 4%, it's 4/10, which is 40%. 40 parts out of 100. And 3/4 we just saw is 75%. Now I can compare them much more easily because they're all the same type of number, they're all percentages. I can see that 0.4 is the smallest, then 43%, then a half, and finally 3/4 is the largest number. So you're going to have a go at one of those in your independent task in a moment, but just remember you can turn them into percentages, fractions, decimals, whichever one you're more comfortable with. But this fact that we can convert between these three types of number is one of the reasons why we do so much practice at this, because it makes different mathematical problems much easier to tackle when you can compare things that are written in the same way.